I was just 22 when I first met Michael. It was the kind of evening that feels insignificant at the time but lingers for a lifetime, a backyard barbecue in a sleepy little town in Pennsylvania. My best friend had dragged me there, insisting I needed to meet people, and there he was, standing near the grill with a beer in his hand, laughing at something I never did catch. Michael wasn't the type who turned heads across a room. No, he was something quieter, something that settled under your skin before you realized it. He had a way of listening, really listening, like you were the only person in the world worth hearing. We spent that whole evening talking. About everything and nothing. About books neither of us had finished, about dreams we had shelved away when life demanded rent money and gas bills. He made me laugh, the real kind, the kind that bubbles up from a place you thought had gone cold. By the time the sun dipped low behind the oak trees, something had shifted. I didn't know it yet, but that night, my life had taken a turn so quiet, so soft, I barely noticed. Our courtship wasn't a whirlwind. It was a slow unfolding. Coffee dates after long shifts at work. Cheap pizza slices eaten in the front seat of his rusted pickup truck. Walks through the fall leaves, kicking them up like children. We didn't have much, no big vacations, no fancy dinners. But somehow, it felt like we had everything. There was a comfort to it, a steadiness I had never known I was craving. The night he proposed, we were sitting on the hood of his truck under a sky littered with stars. He didn't even have a ring yet. He just blurted it out, half laughing, half terrified. I think I'd be an idiot if I didn't spend the rest of my life with you. And there it was. Simple. Honest. Like him. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. A few weeks later, we went to a tiny jewelry store downtown, the kind with dusty velvet displays and an old man behind the counter who knew everyone's stories. Michael picked a simple gold band, nothing fancy, but solid, real, and asked to have it engraved inside. When he slipped that ring onto my finger on our wedding day, I remember feeling invincible. Like as long as that band of gold was there, we could weather anything. The inside read, Michael and Sarah, forever. I still remember how my hand trembled when he slid it on, how his thumb lingered just a second longer than necessary against my skin. The photographer caught the moment. It's framed on my mantel even now, though most days I can't bear to look at it for long. Our wedding wasn't grand, just a gathering of family and a few close friends in my parents' backyard. There were paper lanterns swinging in the breeze, a buffet table that kept losing its plates to the wind, and my mother crying so much she barely got through the ceremony. I wore a second-hand dress we altered ourselves, and he wore his best, only, suit. We danced barefoot under the stars, laughing when the grass stained the hem of my dress green. At one point, the power went out, and we all huddled together around a bonfire, passing around marshmallows and cheap wine. It wasn't perfect. But it was ours. And for a long time afterward, I believed in the promise of that night with all my heart. I thought that love, real love, was supposed to be loud, sweeping, like the movies. But Michael taught me something different. That real love is the small, stubborn kind. The kind that shows up even when you're tired, when you're angry, when it's raining, when the bills are due, when your dreams seem too heavy to carry. It's a hand at the small of your back when you're walking into a crowded room. It's a cup of coffee left on the nightstand without a word. It's sitting silently side by side, sharing a space and a life. That ring, that thin band of gold on my finger, came to feel less like jewelry and more like an extension of my own skin. It was my armor. My lighthouse. My tether. For years, I never took it off. Not for a second. Not to sleep. Not to work. Not even when the world started pulling at the edges of what we had built. But time has a way of eroding even the strongest things. And love, no matter how fierce, is not immune to the quiet wear of ordinary life. I wish I had understood that then. Maybe everything would have been different. They don't tell you, when you're young and standing barefoot in the grass making forever promises, that love, even the truest kind, can be worn down not by storms, but by a million tiny raindrops. Michael and I built a life the way most people do, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. There were no grand adventures, no dazzling milestones after the wedding day. Just the steady rhythm of life settling in around us, like dust you stop noticing after a while. The first few years were simple. We rented a small apartment above a diner, where the scent of bacon and burnt coffee seeped through the floorboards every morning. We shared a single car, 2 battered suitcases, and a stubborn belief that love could carry us through anything. Then came the house. A little 2-bedroom on the edge of town, white paint peeling, a porch that sagged like an old man's knees. We thought it was a castle. We painted the walls ourselves, argued over where the couch should go, and planted a maple tree in the front yard that never did grow straight. Then came the babies. 2 boys, loud and messy and endlessly hungry. Life became a blur of diaper changes, midnight fevers, school plays, scraped knees, and overdue bills. And somewhere in all of it, without either of us noticing, the space between Michael and me began to stretch thin. Not from anything loud or dramatic. No betrayals. No screaming fights. Just life. Michael worked long hours at the hardware store. I picked up shifts waitressing at a diner. We passed each other like ships in the night, a kiss on the forehead here, a muttered "love you" there, more ritual than feeling. The conversations that once stretched for hours shrank to lists. Milk. Bread. Pick up Johnny after practice. Did you pay the electric bill? The laughter that once bubbled so easily between us dulled to polite smiles. We weren't unhappy, not exactly. We were tired. Tired in our bones. Tired in our hearts. Sometimes, late at night, I would lie awake listening to the soft rise and fall of his breath beside me. And I would ache for the boy who once traced constellations on my skin with his fingertips. The boy who had promised me forever under a sky full of stars. I would look at the ring still shining on my hand and wonder if the promises made in the flush of youth could survive the weight of so many ordinary days. There were moments, of course, that pulled us back together. Birthday parties with lopsided cakes. Lazy Sunday mornings tangled in sheets. Quiet evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sky bruise purple at sunset. But the moments grew fewer, farther between. And I started to feel invisible. Not unloved, not abandoned. Just unseen. Like a ghost haunting the life we had built together. I stopped telling Michael when I had a bad day. I stopped dreaming out loud. I stopped expecting that look, that one he used to give me, the one that said I was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever laid eyes on. And in its place grew something dangerous. A hollow hunger I didn't know how to name. I wore my ring like armor still. But sometimes, it felt more like a shackle. A reminder of a promise I wasn't sure I knew how to keep anymore. I don't say these things to blame Michael. He was a good man. He loved me in the best way he knew how. But love needs tending. It needs watering and weeding and sun. And somewhere along the way, we both let ours wilt from neglect. We told ourselves that was just how marriage was. That passion was for the young and the foolish. That real love was quiet, worn, and heavy like a winter coat. We were too busy surviving to notice what was slipping away. Looking back now, I can see all the cracks forming. Tiny, harmless-seeming fractures. But cracks widen. And if you're not careful, if you're too tired or too proud or too scared to look closely, one day you wake up and realize the ground beneath your feet isn't solid anymore. And by the time you notice, It's too late to stop the fall. It happened so quietly. I barely noticed. At first, it was just a smile across the church potluck table. A harmless conversation about baseball and bad coffee. A laugh that lingered a little too long. A compliment that landed in a hollow place I hadn't realized was aching to be filled. His name was Daniel. He was a widower, kind, soft-spoken, with the sort of sadness in his eyes that made you want to sit down and stay a while. We both had that worn look about us. The look of people who had given so much of themselves to the lives they had built that they hardly recognized what was left. It started with small things. A quick chat after Sunday service. A helping hand when the chairs needed stacking. A casual offer to grab coffee, sometime, the way neighbors do. I told myself it was nothing. That it was harmless to want to feel seen again. That I was still the woman who wore her wedding ring proudly, the woman who had built a whole life on a foundation of vows. But loneliness is a cunning thing. It doesn't knock down the door. It slips in through the cracks. The first time Daniel touched my hand. Just a brush, a whisper of a touch. It felt like lightning under my skin. I laughed it off. But that night, lying in bed next to Michael, I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my mind. It was the first time in years I had felt alive. Not just needed. Not just useful. Desired. It terrified me. It thrilled me. It tore something loose inside me that I didn't know how to bolt back down. One evening, after a particularly long, hollow day, Daniel asked if I wanted to grab a coffee. I should have said no. I should have remembered the ring on my finger, the man waiting for me at home. Instead, I said yes. We sat in a corner booth of that old diner. The same one where Michael and I used to go when we were too poor for anything fancier. But with Daniel, the booth felt different. The lights were softer. The air seemed thicker. We talked for hours, about music, about regrets, about how life never turns out the way you think it will when you're 20 and invincible. I laughed until my ribs ached. I confessed things I hadn't even admitted to myself. And when Daniel reached across the table and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, I didn't pull away. I let it happen. The guilt came crashing in the moment I got home. Michael was sitting in his recliner, half asleep, the TV casting blue light across his face. I stood there for a long moment, watching him. My husband. The man who had built a life with me. Brick by brick. Year by year. I should have fallen to my knees and wept for the betrayal blooming in my heart. Instead, I slid past him without a word. Climbed the stairs in silence. And closed our bedroom door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring down at my hand. At the simple gold band that had once felt so weightless. It burned against my skin now. A brand. A reminder. Slowly, almost without thinking, I slipped it off. My finger felt naked, wrong, like I had severed a part of myself. I tucked the ring into the back of my dresser drawer. Behind the socks I never wore. And with it, I tucked away the version of myself I had promised I would always be. I told myself it was just for the night. Just until I could find my footing again. Just until the ache inside me quieted down. But life doesn't wait for you to figure yourself out. And choices, the wrong ones, have a way of setting roots faster than you can pull them up. That night, after I tucked the ring away, Michael called out for me in his sleep. I froze at the door, hand on the knob, listening to him murmur my name in that soft, familiar way. 1,000 memories flooded in. His hand holding mine through childbirth. His voice soothing me after my father died. his arms around me when the world felt too heavy to bear. I almost turned back. Almost. But pride, and guilt, and fear of facing what I had already broken, kept me frozen. And so, I climbed into bed beside him, turned my back, and stared at the dark until morning came. I didn't know, couldn't know, that it would be the last night we ever shared. That fate, unforgiving and merciless, was already winding itself around us, tightening, preparing to take him from me forever. I thought I had time. Time to fix it. Time to come clean. Time to be better. But sometimes, life doesn't give you time. Sometimes, all you get is one mistake, and the weight of it for the rest of your life. The day started like any other. The ordinary kind you don't remember until it's the last one. Michael left for work early, slipping a kiss against my forehead before the sun had even cleared the horizon. I mumbled something half asleep, barely opening my eyes. I wish I had looked at him longer. I wish I had said more than a sleepy grunt. If I had known it was the last kiss he would ever give me, I would have held on. The hours crawled by. I cleaned the house, folded laundry, went through the dull motions of a life that had once felt vibrant. I didn't call him just to say hello. I didn't pack him a better lunch like I'd meant to. I didn't even think about him much at all. My mind was elsewhere, turning over secret things, dangerous things, things that had no place in the life I had promised to cherish. The guilt gnawed at the edge of my mind, but I pushed it down. The way you push down a loose thread in a sweater and pretend it won't unravel. That night, Michael came home later than usual. He looked tired, paler than I remembered. I asked if he was okay. One of those casual questions you ask without really expecting an answer. He smiled, that crooked little smile I had fallen in love with, and said he was just tired. I believed him. Or maybe I just wanted to. After dinner, he sat down in his old recliner. The one that sagged a little to the left, the one he refused to replace. The TV droned on, some old western, the gunshots muffled by the worn-out speakers. I busied myself with the dishes, pretending everything was fine. Pretending I wasn't wearing an invisible hole in the floor, pacing back and forth between duty and temptation. I told myself I'd talk to him tomorrow. I told myself I'd find the words to make it right. Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. I found him just after midnight. At first, I thought he was sleeping. His head slumped back, his mouth slightly open, the TV casting flickering shadows across his face. I said his name. Once. Twice. Louder. No answer. A cold fear gripped me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I dropped the dish towel in my hands and stumbled toward him. His skin was too pale. His chest too still. I shook him. Gently at first, then harder. Michael, wake up. Please, wake up. My voice broke on the last word. When he didn't move. Didn't even flinch. I fumbled for the phone with trembling hands and called 911. I don't remember much of what I said. Only the frantic words spilling out between gasps for air. Only the unbearable silence on the other end of the line. The paramedics arrived fast. Sirens splitting open the night. Red and blue lights bounced off the walls of the living room we had painted together so long ago. They tried. God, they tried. Chest compressions. Oxygen masks. Urgent commands barked into radios. I stood back, useless. Arms wrapped tight around myself as if I could hold my world together by sheer force of will. I kept looking at his hand. His left hand. The one that had once slid that golden ring onto my finger. It was lying limp at his side. And in the blur of grief and sirens and disbelief, a terrible, impossible thought stabbed through me. I wasn't wearing mine. At the hospital, the news came quickly. A stroke, they said. Severe. Massive. No warning signs. We did everything we could, the doctor said, his voice kind but distant, already moving on to the next crisis waiting down the hall. Everything we could. Everything but what mattered. Everything but giving me back the man I had spent half my life loving. And half a moment betraying. They let me sit with him. In a small, sterile room that smelled of bleach and heartbreak. I held his hand. Still warm, still calloused from a lifetime of honest work. And I told him I was sorry. Over and over and over. I don't know if he heard me. I don't know if it matters. Some things are too big for words to mend. Some things are too broken. When I got home, the house was too quiet. The dishes were still in the sink. The TV was still buzzing in the living room. And the drawer upstairs, the one where I had hidden my wedding ring, was still slightly ajar. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it. The weight of everything pressing down so hard I thought I might shatter right there on the floor. Finally, with hands that didn't feel like my own, I pulled the drawer open. There it was. The ring. Dull, forgotten, abandoned. I slid it back onto my finger. The metal cold against my skin. And I wept. Wept for what I had done. Wept for what I had lost. Wept for the life we had built together. Now broken beyond repair. That night, sitting alone on the edge of our bed, wearing a ring that no longer felt like a promise but a punishment, I understood something I had never wanted to know. There are mistakes you can't come back from. There are choices that carve scars so deep they never truly heal. And sometimes, the only thing left to do is carry them for the rest of your life. Grief has a strange way of hollowing you out. It doesn't just break your heart. It scrapes you clean from the inside, leaving you a shell of the person you once were. In the weeks after Michael's death, I moved through the days like a ghost. I ate because people put food in front of me. I spoke because people asked questions that needed answering. But I wasn't really there. Not in the way that mattered. The funeral was a blur of faces. Neighbors, church friends, co-workers. All offering casseroles and condolences. All saying the same, hollow things. He was such a good man. Gone too soon. At least he didn't suffer. I nodded and smiled and thanked them. But inside, I wanted to scream. Because none of them knew. None of them knew the truth. That the night Michael left this earth, his wife wasn't wearing the symbol of their vows. That she had traded a lifetime of love for a few stolen glances and half-whispered dreams. They spoke of me as a widow. But in my heart, I felt like a criminal. After everyone went home, after the flowers wilted and the sympathy cards stopped coming, the real grieving began. I spent hours sitting in our empty living room, staring at nothing, listening to the silence press down against my ribs. I wore the ring every day, slipped it on every morning with trembling fingers, let it bite into my skin like penance. It wasn't love that kept it there anymore. It was shame. A quiet, heavy shame that settled into my bones and made a home there. I tried to stay busy. I volunteered at the church. I baked casseroles for people I barely knew. I smiled and nodded and played the part of the grieving widow who was holding up so well. But every time someone looked at my left hand and smiled at the sight of that ring, I felt like a fraud. A walking lie wrapped in grief and gold. Some nights, I would sit by the dresser, pull the drawer open, and stare at the empty space where the ring had once hidden. It was still there, of course. Now back on my hand. Now a part of me again. But the drawer, the empty drawer, felt like a wound that would never heal. A scar I had carved into my own life. One reckless night at a time. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when I almost convinced myself that I could forgive myself. That Michael would have forgiven me. If he had known. He was that kind of man. Soft-hearted. Quick to see the best in people. But those moments never lasted long. Because deep down, I knew forgiveness wasn't mine to have. Not from him. And certainly not from myself. I watched our sons grow into men without him. Watched them graduate, marry, start families of their own. Every milestone they reached, every empty seat at every important table, was a reminder. A reminder that Michael should have been there. That I had stolen even the smallest chance of making things right. Years rolled by, one indistinguishable from the next. And still, I wore the ring. Through holidays and birthdays and lonely Tuesday mornings. Through thunderstorms and sleepless nights. Through laughter that felt like betrayal, and tears that never seemed to wash anything clean. It dug into my skin until a faint groove formed beneath it. A permanent mark. A physical reminder of the invisible weight I carried. Some days, I would catch a glimpse of it in the mirror and flinch. As if it were a noose rather than a band of gold. People say time heals all wounds. They're wrong. Time just teaches you how to carry them. How to tuck them into the quiet corners of your heart and keep moving forward. Even when every step feels like a betrayal. I built a life after Michael. A small, simple life. A life of routines and quiet repentance. But no matter how many days I lived, no matter how many good deeds I tried to stack against the weight of that one terrible choice, I could never escape the truth. The ring on my finger wasn't a promise anymore. It was a sentence. One I would serve until my last breath. 60 years. It sounds like such a long time when you're young. An endless stretch of birthdays and holidays, of dreams waiting to be caught. But now, sitting here in this old house with its sagging porch and creaking floors, I know the truth. 60 years goes by in a blink. You spend your youth chasing things that don't matter. And you spend your old age mourning the things you took for granted. I don't wear the ring now because it symbolizes love. I wear it because it reminds me of what I lost. Of what I threw away. It cuts into my skin a little deeper these days. The arthritis in my hands makes it harder to slip on and off. But I wouldn't take it off even if I could. Some burdens aren't meant to be set down. Some debts are meant to be carried all the way to the end. I sit by the window most afternoons, watching the maple tree we planted together. The one that never grew quite straight. It leans heavily now, weathered by decades of storms. Its branches twisted and gnarled. It reminds me of us. Of what we tried to build. Of how hard we fought against the winds. Of how, in the end, even the strongest roots sometimes can't hold. Sometimes, late at night, I still talk to Michael. I whisper into the darkness. Words I should have said when he could still hear them. I'm sorry. I love you. I was weak. I was foolish. You deserved better. The walls don't answer back. Neither does the ring pressed tight against my chest when I cry myself to sleep. But saying the words matters. Even now. Especially now. I wrote him a letter once. Pages and pages of everything I never had the courage to say. I tucked it away in a drawer, next to the old photo albums and the bundle of cards he gave me over the years. Yellowed now, brittle with age. Maybe when I'm gone, one of my sons will find it. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll hate me a little. I would deserve it. But I hope. God, I hope. They'll also understand that love, real love, isn't perfect. It's messy. It's fragile. And sometimes, it fails in ways you can never undo. If there's anything I've learned, it's this. You don't always get the chance to fix what you've broken. You don't always get to make amends. Sometimes, you only get the choice to live better for as long as you can. To carry the weight. To feel every ounce of it. To remember. To never forget. There's a kind of mercy in remembering. In choosing not to look away from the things that shame you. In choosing to wear them like armor. Even when they threaten to crush you. The ring stays on my hand. Not because it binds me to Michael. But because it binds me to the truth. To who I was. To who I failed to be. To the love that I betrayed and the man who never knew. When my time comes, I won't be buried in fancy jewelry or silk dresses. I'll be buried in this simple gold band. Weathered, worn, almost fused to the skin it once graced so easily. A silent testimony. A confession without words. A lifetime sentence I'll serve all the way into whatever comes next. Because some wounds aren't meant to heal. Some promises, once broken, echo louder than any vow ever spoken. And some rings, once worn, can never, ever be taken off again.